Alexander Scott was never a man who lingered on kindness. At 38, the sharp edge of his arrogance cut through every room like a razor's kiss. Yet, no one knew the secret shadows behind his cold eyes. What if the most untouchable man in the city was about to face the one thing he could never control? Love. The city's skyline glittered under the dying light of a Friday evening, the glass towers reflecting a million stories of hope, pain, and ambition. Among these stories was Alexander Scott's, a tale not of a boy who dreamed of glory, but of a man who built an empire with a cold hand and an iron will. His was a name whispered with awe and fear, a man who had mastered the art of detachment and domination. From his youth, Alexander was the golden boy, basketball star, prom king, the face every girl wished to see smile at her. But beneath that charm, there was a flicker of something darker. Pride, a hard shell forged from abandonment and loneliness. Now, as the director of H&W Company, one of the largest pharmaceutical firms in the nation, his life was a fortress of achievements and failures. His 3 marriages were brief, disastrous echoes of an intimacy he never learned to hold. Children never crossed his mind. His heart was too busy climbing corporate ladders, crushing rivals, and silencing dissent. His employees trembled at his name. Alexander the Disdainful. That was his title in the whispering halls. If you worked under him, you knew the drill. Excellence demanded by threats, empathy traded for cold commands. Peter Walker, his oldest and only real friend, was the soft counterpoint to Alexander's storm. Generous, patient, and kind, Peter had watched his friends rise and fall over 2 decades. "Alex," Peter would say, "there's a man inside you yet to break free. You just have to want him to live." But Alexander only lowered his eyes, tightening his jaw. His silence louder than any confession. That night, Alexander stood near the bar in a downtown club, the strobe lights throwing fragmented colors across his sharp features. He was out of place here, among the loud music and carefree dancers, but Peter's invitation had been insistent. Peter laughed, clinking his glass to Alexander's. "Come on, loosen up. You're not always the boss tonight." Alexander's smirk was the closest thing to a smile he could give. He scanned the crowd, noticing the eyes that followed him. Admiration, curiosity, maybe envy. He cared little. The club was noise, chaos, and distraction, everything he usually avoided. Yet, as the night wore on, he felt the weight of years pressing against his chest. Peter's words echoed again. "You need to change, Alex, or you'll lose more than just respect." The next morning, the company's corridors were buzzing louder than usual. The new head of marketing, Hannah Cooper, had arrived, and the staff whispered like children at recess. She was not what anyone expected. With golden hair cascading in soft waves, eyes like warm earth, and a smile that seemed to hold no judgment, Hannah carried a lightness that seemed to defy the harsh world of corporate ambition. Walking with a quiet confidence, she exuded kindness, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. When summoned to Alexander's office, the tension was palpable. She knocked, stepped in, and introduced herself with a voice steady but warm. Before she could finish, Alexander's curt command cut through the air. "Come in," he said sharply, not even lifting his eyes. "We have much to discuss." "Busy," Don't expect pleasantries." He handed her a thick folder heavy with unfinished work, and left her standing in the cold silence of his office. Despite the frosty welcome, Hannah was undeterred. She approached her work with the precision of an artist and the heart of a healer. Day by day, she navigated Alexander's sharp edges with patience and respect. Their interactions, initially mechanical, began to soften. Alexander noticed, in the slight tilt of her head, the gentle but firm way she defended her ideas, and her refusal to be intimidated by him. In meetings, her voice was calm yet persuasive, her strategies innovative but grounded. She did not compete with him. Instead, she challenged him to see beyond the bottom line. And quietly, something inside Alexander began to shift. One busy afternoon in the cafeteria, Alexander's world cracked. A sudden sharp pain in his leg sent him staggering. His usual arrogant mask faltered as he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Hannah nearby rushed forward. "Are you okay? Let me help." Her voice was filled with genuine concern, the kind of warmth that startled him. "Don't touch me," he snapped, withdrawing as if her touch could burn him. His eyes were a storm, vulnerable and fierce all at once. Hannah stood frozen, confusion and sympathy warring in her heart. She realized this man, who appeared so invincible, was battling demons no one else saw. As Alexander walked away, limping but resolute, Hannah's thoughts swirled. There was something beneath his arrogance, a wound buried deep. And she felt, inexplicably, that if she could just reach him, not as an employee but as a person, she might uncover the man hiding beneath the mask. The story of Alexander Scott was not just one of power and pride. It was a story of a heart locked tight, waiting for the right key. Alexander Scott was never the type to accept surprises, much less in his own territory, the absolute control of his life and the empire he had built. But on that particular night, in a nightclub suffocated by the pulsating electronic music, the unexpected confronted him in a way neither he nor Peter could have predicted. Alexander had been dragged there by Peter, his only true friend, the one who, with the calmness of a lighthouse, insisted on showing him there was something beyond the cold corporate jungle where Alexander reigned supreme. While Peter lost himself in the dance, smiling with a lightness that seemed to almost challenge him, Alexander remained rigid, a statue amid the chaos of lights and moving bodies. It was then that Alexander's eyes caught an image that made him freeze, ripping him from the monotony of the place and the boredom of his own arrogance. Hannah Cooper, the new marketing superintendent, was there, smiling, radiant and light, talking with a few people around the bar, completely unaware of the cruel world he represented at the office. That casual encounter was like an electric shock for Alexander. He watched her for a few seconds, his heart beating a little faster than he cared to admit. Hannah, noticing the intense stare, turned in his direction, surprised but maintaining the serenity that always characterized her. "Alexander," she said with the sweet voice he already knew, "I didn't expect to see you here." He responded in a dry, cutting tone, his usual shield. "Neither did I." It was as if, in that instant, two worlds that should have been separate began to overlap, and neither knew exactly what to do with that collision. Peter, sensing the tension, approached, laughing with that ease that seemed to disarm everything, even Alexander himself. Well, what do we have here?" Peter teased, a playful sparkle in his eyes. Hannah smiled politely, but there was a certain discomfort, as if she were treading on unfamiliar ground. Alexander did not like the situation one bit. He couldn't quite say why, but something about seeing Hannah there, so far from the rigid structure of the office, stirred something in him beyond mere annoyance. It was as if the light and airy world she brought threatened the ice fortress he had built over so many years. In the days that followed, the unexpected nightclub encounter became a shadow lingering over Alexander. He couldn't get Hannah out of his mind, and it irritated him deeply, because he wasn't used to losing control of his emotions. In fact, he always suffocated them. On the other hand, Hannah, with her patience and gentle way, continued working alongside him, showing competence and serenity, facing his coldness with a quiet strength few could display in front of Alexander, the despicable. One night, Peter invited Hannah to dinner, a simple gesture but one that sounded like an invasion into Alexander's exclusive territory. Upon hearing about the invitation, Alexander's reaction was explosive. He stared at Peter with a mixture of jealousy and resentment he tried to ignore. "What are you doing with my friend?" he asked, his voice carrying a possessive tone, as if Peter were a piece only he could manipulate. Hannah, for her part, faced Alexander with the firmness that always accompanied her, answering without hesitation, "We're just friends, Alexander. Nothing more." Her response, honest and direct, made Alexander feel a strange tightness in his chest, as if that simple phrase carried a weight he couldn't measure. The story of Alexander Scott was not just one of power and pride. It was a story of a heart locked tight, waiting for the right key. Alexander Scott was never the type to accept surprises, much less in his own territory, the absolute control of his life and the empire he had built. But on that particular night, in a nightclub suffocated by the pulsating electronic music, the unexpected confronted him in a way neither he nor Peter could have predicted. Alexander had been dragged there by Peter, his only true friend, the one who, with the calmness of a lighthouse, insisted on showing him there was something beyond the cold corporate jungle where Alexander reigned supreme. While Peter lost himself in the dance, smiling with a lightness that seemed to almost challenge him, Alexander remained rigid, a statue amid the chaos of lights and moving bodies. It was then that Alexander's eyes caught an image that made him freeze, ripping him from the monotony of the place and the boredom of his own arrogance. Hannah Cooper, the new marketing superintendent, was there, smiling, radiant and light, talking with a few people around the bar, completely unaware of the cruel world he represented at the office. That casual encounter was like an electric shock for Alexander. He watched her for a few seconds, his heart beating a little faster than he cared to admit. Hannah, noticing the intense stare, turned in his direction, surprised but maintaining the serenity that always characterized her. "Alexander," she said with the sweet voice he already knew, "I didn't expect to see you here." He responded in a dry, cutting tone, his usual shield. "Neither did I." It was as if, in that instant, two worlds that should have been separate began to overlap, and neither knew exactly what to do with that collision. Peter, sensing the tension, approached, laughing with that ease that seemed to disarm everything, even Alexander himself. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Peter teased, a playful sparkle in his eyes. Hannah smiled politely, but there was a certain discomfort, as if she were treading on unfamiliar ground. Alexander did not like the situation one bit. He couldn't quite say why, but something about seeing Hannah there, so far from the rigid structure of the office, stirred something in him beyond mere annoyance. It was as if the light and airy world she brought threatened the ice fortress he had built over so many years. In the days that followed, the unexpected nightclub encounter became a shadow lingering over Alexander. He couldn't get Hannah out of his mind, and it irritated him deeply, because he wasn't used to losing control of his emotions. In fact, he always suffocated them. On the other hand, Hannah, with her patience and gentle way, continued working alongside him, showing competence and serenity, facing his coldness with a quiet strength few could display in front of Alexander, the despicable. One night, Peter invited Hannah to dinner, a simple gesture but one that sounded like an invasion into Alexander's exclusive territory. Upon hearing about the invitation, Alexander's reaction was explosive. He stared at Peter with a mixture of jealousy and resentment he tried to ignore. "What are you doing with my friend?" he asked, his voice carrying a possessive tone, as if Peter were a piece only he could manipulate. Hannah, for her part, faced Alexander with the firmness that always accompanied her, answering without hesitation, "We're just friends, Alexander. Nothing more." Her response, honest and direct, made Alexander feel a strange tightness in his chest, as if that simple phrase carried a weight he couldn't measure. "Stay back, Hannah. I'm fine," he said firmly, trying to stand alone, but clearly uncomfortable. She insisted, worried, offering her arm to help him, but he refused with a cold look that left her confused and slightly hurt. Why such rejection? Why wouldn't he let someone, especially her, help him? Hannah knew this man carried not just superficial arrogance but something deeper, a silent pain he masked with clenched fists and harsh words. In the following days, the incident in the kitchen lingered in their minds as a reminder that between them, there was more than just professional relations. Alexander, though he wouldn't admit it, felt growing restlessness. What was that uncomfortable feeling he couldn't identify? Why did Hannah, with her calm and kindness, stir something inside him that he refused to face? And Hannah herself felt torn between wanting to get closer and the need to keep her distance from a man who seemed an impenetrable fortress. Fate, always present in love stories, made Alexander, Peter, and Hannah cross paths again, this time outside the company's walls, in a nightclub where the loud music seemed to try drowning out each one's inner conflicts. Hannah, who usually avoided such places, had been taken by a friend for a night out, not expecting to run into the two men who somehow dominated her thoughts. Alexander, with his always commanding posture, looked out of place amid flashing lights and pounding sound, while Peter threw himself into the joy with a naturalness that contrasted with his friend's rigidity. The encounter was inevitable and heavy with unspoken tensions. Alexander watched Hannah with eyes trying to control the situation, but unable to hide a flicker of vulnerability. Hannah faced him with a mix of surprise and a strange closeness, as if in that moment the barrier between them had broken, if only for seconds. Peter, ever the peacemaker, tried to lighten the atmosphere with jokes and casual talk, but tension hung in the air like a dissonant note amid a soft melody. A few days later, Peter invited Hannah to a simple dinner, a gesture he considered friendly, but for Alexander, it sounded like an intrusion into his private world. He didn't like the idea of losing control, and Hannah's closeness to Peter seemed to challenge his limits. Alexander's reaction was harsh, his voice laced with veiled jealousy and wounded pride. "What are you doing with my friend?" he asked. His expression closed off, unable to hide his discomfort. Hannah, with her usual firmness, answered without hesitation, "We're just friends, Alexander. Nothing more." The clear and honest response hit Alexander like a blow. He found himself forced to swallow his pride and accept this reality. Yet, the seed of doubt had already been planted in his heart. Why did this woman awaken feelings so contradictory? Feelings he neither knew how to name nor control. The episode with the building's doorman marked another turning point in Alexander and Hannah's relationship. One day, Alexander, impatient and arrogant, lost his temper with the man who guarded the building, raising his voice and speaking harshly to him. Hannah, witnessing the scene, didn't hold back and sharply reprimanded Alexander, silencing everyone present. "Enough, Alexander. That man deserves respect." The sentence came with unexpected authority, then the revelation that froze everyone. "That man is my father." The news hit like a bomb, leaving Alexander, who until then had despised the simple man, speechless. Alexander's reaction was complex. He saw in that humble man, whom he had scorned, a dignity he himself had never learned to recognize. From that moment, something inside him began to change. The arrogance gave way to a feeling of responsibility and even remorse. He didn't know how to deal with it, but sensed that this encounter could be the start of a deep transformation. While all this was happening in the quiet of the night, alone in his home, Alexander revisited his painful past, a past only Peter knew in detail. He remembered a childhood marked by abandonment, the hospital where he was left, the devastating moment he discovered he was not the biological child of the parents who raised him. That revelation scarred him forever, creating a void he tried to fill with professional success and empty relationships. Peter had always been by his side, guarding this secret like a silent pact, never revealing it to Hannah or anyone else. It was the weight Alexander carried, a shadow shaping every one of his actions. This silent knowledge added an extra layer of emotion to the narrative, showing that beneath Alexander's arrogance and hardness was a fragile man lost in search of love and acceptance. Peter and Hannah maintained a solid friendship based on respect and companionship, but they realized there was no room for romance between them. They were friends, confidants, life partners in a way, but not lovers. This mature decision was made calmly, both aware that their bond was important but not enough to become something more. The growing closeness between Alexander and Hannah continued, initially centered on work but slowly revealing shared interests beyond spreadsheets and meetings. Conversations about music, literature, dreams, and fears began to fill the spaces between them, creating a connection both felt but dared not name. In an unexpected gesture, Alexander sought out Hannah's father to apologize for his rude and arrogant behavior at the office. Unaware that Hannah was watching from afar, he spoke with sincerity and humility, showing a side few had seen. Hannah, hidden in the shadows, felt a mix of surprise and hope, as if that attitude could be the first step toward real change in that complex and fascinating man. And so, Alexander and Hannah's story continued, filled with challenges, discoveries, and moments of vulnerability that revealed even the hardest hearts could open to love and redemption. The weeks that followed the uneasy apology in the office revealed layers of change in Alexander Scott that no one expected, not even himself. The fortress of arrogance he had carefully built around his heart began to crack, ever so slightly, revealing glimpses of a man who, buried under years of bitterness and control, still harbored the fragile hope of redemption. Hannah Cooper, with her unshakable kindness and quiet strength, was the unexpected catalyst for this transformation. Their relationship, which had started purely on professional grounds, had slowly begun to evolve. Alexander found himself paying attention to her opinions during meetings, genuinely valuing her insights on the company's marketing campaigns. More astonishingly, he noticed that her presence in the office brought a subtle warmth to the sterile corridors of the H&W company, a warmth he secretly craved but refused to admit. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Alexander found himself standing by the office window, watching raindrops race down the glass, reflecting the turmoil inside him. He was restless, more distracted than usual, and the thoughts of Hannah had once again invaded his mind. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Peter, casually inviting him to join them for drinks at the same nightclub where Alexander had first seen Hannah outside the office. Reluctantly, and with a strange flicker of curiosity, Alexander agreed. The nightclub was loud, dimly lit, and chaotic, a stark contrast to the cold orderliness Alexander preferred in his daily life. Yet tonight there was something different. Hannah was there again, laughing with friends, her hair catching the colored lights as she moved effortlessly through the crowd. Alexander felt an unfamiliar pull, a magnetic force that drew him closer despite every instinct telling him to stay distant. Peter nudged him toward Hannah, flashing that mischievous grin that said he already knew what was about to happen. "Go on, Alex. Say hi," Peter encouraged, half joking but with genuine warmth. Alexander hesitated but then squared his shoulders and approached her. "Hannah," he said, his voice rougher than he intended but softening as she turned to face him, eyes sparkling with surprise and something else. "Hope, perhaps?" "Alexander," she smiled. "I didn't expect to see you here again." Neither did I, he thought, but said nothing. Their conversation was brief but charged with unspoken meaning. They spoke about work, about projects, carefully avoiding the vulnerability bubbling beneath their words. Yet, the connection was undeniable, like an invisible thread weaving their lives together in ways neither fully understood. The next morning, Hannah arrived at work feeling a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had noticed the subtle change in Alexander's demeanor, the way he no longer dismissed her ideas outright, the fleeting moments when his eyes softened as they met hers across the conference table. There was a spark, fragile but growing, that promised something new and frightening for both of them. But Alexander's world was far from uncomplicated. That very day, tensions at work escalated. A critical project was facing setbacks, and Alexander's temper flared as he confronted the team responsible. His sharp words and biting tone sent shockwaves through the office, leaving employees tense and wary. Hannah, witnessing this, felt a pang of sadness mixed with frustration. She knew Alexander was capable of more, of kindness, of leadership that inspired rather than intimidated. Determined to reach him, she requested a private meeting, hoping to bridge the gap between his harsh exterior and the man she sensed underneath. In the quiet of the conference room, Hannah spoke gently but firmly. "Alexander, I know you carry a heavy burden, but this anger, it's wearing you down and it's hurting those around you." He looked at her, eyes shadowed with pain. "You don't understand," he muttered. "This is the only way I know how to survive." "Maybe it's time to try a different way," she replied softly. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Peter, stepping in with his usual easy smile, sensing the delicate moment but respecting their privacy. Days turned into weeks, and the fragile bond between Alexander and Hannah deepened. They shared stolen moments in the break room, exchanged ideas that sparked creativity and passion, and began to trust each other in ways neither had anticipated. Yet, the past lingered like a shadow. Alexander's secret, his abandonment at birth, the revelation of not being the biological son of the parents who raised him, haunted his nights. Only Peter knew the full story, carrying it like a sacred burden, never revealing it even to Hannah. One evening, after a long day at work, Alexander found himself wandering the empty halls of the company, his mind a storm of memories and regrets. He stopped by the janitor's closet, where the building's doorman, Mr. Jenkins, was cleaning. The man looked up, offering a tired but genuine smile. "Long day, Mr. Jenkins," Alexander said, surprising himself by speaking softly. Mr. Jenkins nodded. "That it is, sir." Suddenly, Alexander's guard faltered. He saw not just the doorman, but a man who had endured years of disrespect and hardship, much like himself. He wanted to apologize, to make amends for his past behavior. The next day, Alexander approached Mr. Jenkins in front of the staff. Clearing his throat, he said, "I want to apologize for my conduct. It was uncalled for, and you deserve respect." The room fell silent. Hannah, watching from a distance, felt a swell of pride and emotion. The man beside her was her father, and she knew this moment was more than just an apology. It was a crack in Alexander's armor. Their journey was far from over. Alexander's struggle with pride, pain, and vulnerability continued. But with each passing day, hope grew stronger. Hannah's unwavering support and Peter's steadfast friendship became the pillars that held him up when he faltered. One late autumn afternoon, Alexander invited Hannah to a quiet cafe away from the hustle of the city. Over steaming cups of coffee, they shared stories of childhood dreams, fears, and the secret longings buried beneath the surface. "I never thought I'd find someone who sees past the facade," Alexander confessed, his voice low but steady. Hannah smiled, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Sometimes the hardest walls to break are the ones we build around ourselves." In that moment, Alexander realized that redemption wasn't about erasing the past but embracing it, and that love, fragile and fierce, could be the key to unlocking a future he had never dared to imagine. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. What began as professional respect blossomed into something deeper, a connection woven from shared pain, resilience, and the quiet promise of healing. Their story was no longer just about a man and a woman navigating the corporate world. It had become a testament to the power of forgiveness, the courage to change, and the unexpected grace that can emerge when two broken souls find each other in the vastness of a complicated world. And though challenges still awaited them, Alexander and Hannah faced the future with a newfound strength, ready to write the next chapters of their lives together, in a narrative richer than any they had ever imagined. The fragile peace that had begun to settle over Alexander Scott's life was soon to be tested by forces he had long tried to suppress, the ghosts of his past and the simmering tensions that the present still refused to quell. It was a Wednesday morning, and the sterile light of dawn filtered through the windows of the H&W Company's headquarters. The air inside was thick with expectation and unspoken questions. Hannah Cooper arrived earlier than usual, clutching a folder filled with her latest marketing proposals. Her strides were purposeful but tinged with the subtle anxiety that had become a constant companion ever since she'd witnessed the confrontation between Alexander and her father, Mr. Jenkins. Alexander, meanwhile, sat alone in his expansive office, the silence around him a stark contrast to the storm raging within. The apology he had offered to Mr. Jenkins was not just a public gesture. It was the first crack in a wall he had built around himself since childhood. But the fear of vulnerability still gripped him tightly. Would Hannah ever see beyond the cold, commanding exterior? Would Peter's years of friendship and silent protection be enough to hold the pieces together when everything threatened to fall apart? The day unfolded with a series of events that tested every fiber of Alexander's resolve. During the morning briefing, a crisis erupted when a key pharmaceutical product faced unexpected scrutiny from regulators. The project manager faltered under pressure, and Alexander's sharp tongue cut through the tension like a blade. The room grew icy, the staff shrinking back from the man they once viewed as a fearless leader and now only knew as Alexander, the despicable. Hannah, witnessing this, felt a surge of empathy but also frustration. She knew Alexander's anger was a mask for something far deeper, but she struggled to reach the man trapped beneath. Later that afternoon, as Alexander reviewed reports alone, his phone buzzed with a message from Peter. "Lunch? Need to talk. Important." Reluctantly, Alexander agreed. They met at a small cafe near the office, a place away from prying eyes and corporate facades. Peter's expression was serious, a rarity for the usually jovial man. "Alex, you're pushing everyone away," Peter said, leaning forward. "Your temper, your pride. It's killing you, and it's killing what little peace you have left." Alexander scoffed but did not deny it. "I'm the only one who understands what it takes to run this company. Weakness isn't an option. Is it weakness or fear?" Peter challenged. "Fear of being hurt, abandoned again." Alexander's eyes darkened, the memory of his childhood abandonment flashing like a lightning bolt. "You promised you'd never tell anyone." "I never did," Peter assured him. "But you can't keep running from your past. It's catching up." That night, Alexander returned home haunted by Peter's words. The sterile walls of his penthouse apartment seemed to close in, suffocating him with memories of a boy left alone in a hospital room, a boy who learned that love was conditional and fleeting. The emptiness was a cavernous wound that no amount of power or wealth could heal. Meanwhile, Hannah's life was not without its own struggles. Her relationship with her father, Mr. Jenkins, remained complex. Despite Alexander's apology, the scars of past humiliations lingered. Yet, Hannah refused to let bitterness take root. She confronted her father one evening at their modest home. "Dad, you deserve better," she said softly. "Alexander is trying to change. We both are." Mr. Jenkins sighed, his weathered face etched with years of hardship. "I hope you're right, Hannah. But some wounds run deeper than apologies. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden phone call from Alexander, inviting Hannah to join him for dinner, a gesture that caught her off guard. Accepting felt like stepping into unknown territory, but she agreed, sensing the significance behind the invitation. The restaurant was an elegant, quiet place far removed from the corporate battles and city noise. As they dined, conversation flowed with surprising ease, touching on music, books, and dreams long buried. Alexander revealed fragments of his past, carefully avoiding the most painful truths but allowing glimpses of vulnerability to shine through. Hannah listened with a tenderness that disarmed Alexander's defenses. For the first time in years he felt seen, not as a ruthless director or a man defined by his failures, but as a human being capable of growth and love. Their evening ended with a tentative promise to face the future together, whatever it might hold. Yet fate was not finished testing them. Back at the office, tensions erupted anew. A scandal involving a whistleblower threatened to derail the company's reputation. Alexander's instinct was to crush the threat, to assert control with an iron fist. But Hannah counseled caution and compassion, advocating for transparency and integrity. Their conflicting approaches sparked heated debates, revealing not only professional differences but deeper philosophical divides. Alexander's world of power and dominance clashed with Hannah's vision of empathy and collaboration. Amidst the turmoil, Peter remained a steady presence, sometimes a voice of reason, sometimes a subtle mediator. But even he could not shield Alexander from the internal battle raging within. One late night, after a particularly brutal argument over strategy, Alexander found himself alone in the office, staring out at the city skyline. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down like a storm, threatening to break him. Unexpectedly, his phone buzzed with a message from Hannah. "Meet me on the rooftop. I need to talk." Climbing the stairwell, Alexander's heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and hope. On the rooftop, beneath a canopy of stars, Hannah waited, her expression serious but kind. "I know this isn't easy," she began. "But we can't change the past. We can only decide who we want to be moving forward." Her words struck a chord deep within him. The barriers he had erected, around his heart, his identity, began to crumble under the weight of her compassion. In that moment, Alexander made a choice: to embrace vulnerability, to trust in the possibility of love and redemption. Their hands met, a silent promise of healing and partnership. As dawn broke over the city, Alexander and Hannah stood side by side, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead, knowing that together they were stronger than the sum of their broken parts. The seasons were changing, and with them, the rhythm of Alexander Scott's life was shifting in ways he had never imagined possible. The icy walls of his heart, built over decades of abandonment, bitterness, and ruthless ambition, were thawing under the persistent warmth of Hannah Cooper's gentle presence. But the path toward redemption is never linear, and the scars of the past have a way of resurfacing when least expected. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Alexander found himself wandering through the quiet streets near the city park, lost in thought. The golden leaves crunched beneath his polished shoes, and the cold breeze whispered secrets through the trees. His mind replayed the rooftop moment with Hannah, the vulnerability they had shared, the tentative hope that had blossomed between them. Yet, beneath the surface, old fears still lurked. The childhood wounds of abandonment and betrayal were not easily erased. He thought about Peter, his oldest friend and guardian of his darkest secrets. Peter had been more than a friend. He was a brother, the keeper of truths Alexander could never face alone. Alexander's phone buzzed, a message from Peter. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old place." That old place was the cafe where they had forged their bond 20 years ago, long before Alexander's empire had risen and his facade had hardened. When Alexander arrived, Peter was already waiting, his face shadowed by concern. "Alex, I've been thinking," Peter said carefully. "You're changing, but there's something you need to face. Your past isn't just a ghost. It's a part of you that wants to be acknowledged. Hiding it only gives it power." Alexander nodded slowly, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. "I know. But it's hard. The truth about my birth. The fact that I was abandoned. I never wanted to be that vulnerable." Peter leaned forward, voice soft but firm. "Vulnerability isn't weakness, Alex. It's the birthplace of courage. You've carried this burden alone for too long. Maybe it's time to let someone in." That evening, Alexander sat in his penthouse, staring at the city lights shimmering below. His thoughts were a whirlwind. Could he trust Hannah enough to reveal the secret he'd hidden even from Peter? Could he break the chains of his past and allow love to heal the wounds? Meanwhile, Hannah was preparing for a crucial presentation that could reshape the marketing strategy for the company's newest pharmaceutical breakthrough. The pressure was immense, but she welcomed the challenge. It was a chance to prove herself not just as a capable professional, but as someone who could stand alongside Alexander, not beneath or against him. Her phone vibrated, a message from Alexander. "Can we meet? I need to talk." When they met in the quiet sanctuary of a downtown cafe, Alexander's usual arrogance was absent. Instead, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made Hannah's heart ache with empathy. "I want to tell you something," he began, voice low. "Something I've never shared with anyone, not even Peter." He told her about the hospital where he had been left as a newborn, the cold loneliness of being abandoned, the crushing pain of discovering at 12 years old that the parents who raised him were not his own. He spoke of the anger, the bitterness, the walls he built to protect himself. And most of all, he spoke of the fear that he would never be truly loved. Hannah listened without interruption, her hands trembling slightly as she reached across the table to hold his. "Thank you for trusting me," she said softly. "Your story doesn't define you, Alexander. It shapes you, yes, but it doesn't determine your future." Their connection deepened in that moment, a bond forged in honesty and acceptance. For the first time, Alexander felt a flicker of hope, not just for success or power, but for love that was real and lasting. But life rarely grants second chances without trials. The very next day, a scandal erupted within the company. An anonymous email leaked sensitive information about unethical practices in one of the pharmaceutical divisions. The media descended like vultures, demanding accountability. Alexander's leadership was questioned, and the board convened an emergency meeting to decide the company's fate. Alexander faced the storm head-on, but this time he was not alone. Hannah stood by his side, advocating for transparency and reform rather than denial and damage control. Their partnership, forged in trust and struggle, became a beacon of hope within the turmoil. Peter, too, played a crucial role, using his connections to manage the fallout discreetly and protect Alexander from further harm. The crisis revealed cracks in Alexander's empire, but it also revealed the man beneath the mask, flawed, human, and capable of change. Amidst the chaos, Alexander's relationship with Hannah blossomed. They discovered shared dreams, of building not just a business empire, but a legacy of integrity and compassion. Nights were spent talking about philosophy, faith, and the meaning of success beyond wealth. One evening, as they walked through the park where Alexander had once felt so alone, Hannah stopped and looked up at the stars. "You've come so far, Alexander," she whispered. "But remember, the journey isn't over. Healing takes time." Alexander smiled, the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. "I'm ready to keep walking with you." Their growing love was not without obstacles. Alexander's ex-wives, threatened by his transformation, stirred up old conflicts. Rumors circulated in the press, attempting to undermine his newfound reputation. But Alexander and Hannah stood firm, their bond a shield against the storm. In a poignant twist, Alexander's biological mother, a woman who had given him up but never stopped searching, contacted Peter, seeking to reconnect. Peter, respecting Alexander's privacy, hesitated but eventually arranged a meeting. The reunion was fraught with emotion, tears, apologies, and tentative forgiveness. Alexander confronted the woman who had abandoned him, and in that confrontation, he found unexpected peace. It was not a fairy tale ending, but a real one, complex, painful, and ultimately healing. As winter gave way to spring, the company began to recover. Alexander implemented reforms, fostering a culture of respect and accountability. Hannah's marketing strategies propelled the new product to success, cementing their professional and personal partnership. One afternoon, in the warmth of the sunlit office, Alexander surprised Hannah with a ring, a symbol not of possession, but of partnership and hope. "I don't want to be the man I was," he said, voice steady. "I want to be better. For you, for Peter, for myself." Hannah's eyes shone with tears. "And I want to be by your side, every step." Their love story, once marked by arrogance and pain, had transformed into a testament of resilience and grace. A reminder that even the coldest hearts can learn to beat with warmth and compassion. As the story closed, Alexander stood on the rooftop once more, this time not alone but with Hannah and Peter beside him. The city stretched out below, vast and full of possibility. "Life isn't about avoiding the storms," Alexander said quietly. "It's about learning to dance in the rain, with the right people." And with that, they faced the horizon, ready to write the next chapter together.